Directors.
Yay.
Beautiful.
Cool. How about attorneys? Any of you? Very good. How about executives? Okay. Agents, managers? They never want to identify themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
Okay. Welcome to the Hollywood MasterClass at Digital Hollywood Spring 2017. I'm Catherine Clinch. I'll be your moderator. We have a panel of amazing individuals here today. For starters, there's Adam Leipzig directly to my left. Adam has been a studio executive and an independent producer. His credits include Dead Poets Society, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, A Plastic Ocean, Titus, and of course, March of the Penguins. Adam has written 2 books. By the end of this panel, you're going to know why you want to get them, so just take note of them now. Rob Edwards is a screenwriter. Started off in television on shows like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, A Different World, Full House, In Living Color, and went on to write Treasure Planet and The Princess and the Frog for Disney. Craig Ross Jr. has directed episodes of Numbers, Bones, Prison Break, NCIS, Jane 3D, which I think is a really kick-ass graphic up there. And before there was Tangerine, there was a movie that Craig directed on his iPhone. He produced, directed, edited, and did everything on his iPhone, so that's going to be cool to talk about. Gary Goldberger is an attorney, a transactional attorney, not a representation attorney. He's also been an independent producer, so he's excellent at representing independent producers when the time comes to negotiate a deal. He is a member of BAFTA and the Television Academy. He's also a member of California Lawyers for the Arts. And beyond that, he's a member of Ivy League networking groups, so he's an all-around resource. I, last but not least, started out writing television in the 80s and 90s. I did all the boys' shows that are listed up there. Then I spent a lot of time with a magazine called Creative Screenwriting, if any of you have ever read that, and I helped produce the Screenwriting Expo for 5 years. And that little logo up there is for a mobile platform that I've invented, and I have 3 patents for, and I'm very proud of, and hopefully you'll all be addicted to it by next year. So let's start by exploring the creative journey. Rob, how does the creative journey begin with an idea, and both when you generate an idea and when you're assigned to write that idea, because you've done both?
Yeah, right. Oh, cool. When I generate an idea, usually, it's funny because like you always say, somebody once said, inventors go on what people complain about and solve those problems. So a lot of times I'll come out of a movie and I'll just say, oh God, it could have been so much better. And there's this thing at Disney Pixar. Andrew Setton says, be a film goer first, be a filmmaker second, right? So when I see something that I hate, I always say like, okay, well, how could this have been better? What should it have been? And then I sit down and I just start, with 3x5 cards, just working it out. What are the scenes that I thought were missing? What are the characters that I want to see? A lot of times it's modern characters, people that I know, stuff like that I'll start with. Myself, what am I exploring? And then I'll just continue to flesh it out until it's an actual story. And then I'll just sit down and write it and show it to some friends, try to sell it as a spec. Go ahead.
No, I want you to talk a little bit. You have the most intricate writing process I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's not.
And it's really, obviously it works. So would you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, it continues to evolve all the time. It's really bad because writing is a lot of times, it's assembling puzzle pieces. So you're trying to take a character through a journey. Going to change this person's life. You're going to beat the crap out of them as you go. You want them to have a big cathartic moment when they change, what they're thinking from one way to another. And you want all of that stuff to seem real on one hand, and for me, funny on the other, and not boring as a third component to that. And so I'll sit down. One weird thing, like I have. In my office, there are 2 doors, and I'm usually working on 2 projects at a time. And so the doorknob is the middle of the movie, the knee and below is the 3rd act, and shoulder level and up is the 1st act. So I will, I'll sit there and I'll say, what's a good way to introduce a character it'd be like this if the guys met in like an elevator and blah, 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 you know, stuff. And I'll just write that down on a Post-it note and I'll put it on top of the thing. And I'll continue to do that. Okay, great, midpoint turn. I don't know if these terms, you guys know like what I call the 30, 60, 90 of it all, right? The first 30 minutes are the first act, second 60 are the second act, and then the last 30 are the third act. For me, I break the second act into 4 parts. See, it all gets, I'm terrible with it because there's this old concept of like the reels, you know, where you would have in old movies, they would only last 15 minutes, and then they'd click, and then you'd see the next reel. And a lot of times movies were created so that if you got lost, if a reel got dropped or something like that, the movie would still make sense. And I like to think of it in those terms. So 15 minutes, my first 15-minute block, you know, the princess, in The Princess and the Frog, it was from the moment that she has her dreams gets foiled, and then she meets the prince. Boom, that's one thing. And then second reel is she meets the prince, she kisses the guy, whatever, she turns into a frog, she winds up in the bayou, and the two handshake, they make an agreement to, he's gonna pay her restaurant, she's gonna get him out of there alive, right? Boom, so that's 2 reels. And then, you get to what they call the, what is it, Sex at 60, where you get at the midpoint, the people who hate each other fall in love, people who love each other, hate each other, the hunter becomes the hunted, that kind of thing. Those dynamics all have to shift in the middle. So I'm always looking at the door and saying, okay, well, what's the best way to approach these little sequences? How can I make them all pop, and how can I tell a story in each 15 minutes?
Who came up with Sex at 60?
Sex at 60 was like, that's one of those black and white movie terms. That's like, Sex at 60. It's like one of those things that you hear like on TMC. It's just been around since.
I've written a long time. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah, Sex at 60. At the 60-minute point, the people who've, Princess and the Frog was basically structurally, we used It Happened One Night as our kind of basis for it. And so anytime we had a question like, okay, well, is this getting boring? Does it stop working? We would go back to It Happened One Night. And at 60 on the clock, boom, they're on top of each other and they're about to kiss. Like, okay, that's great, because they've hated each other all the way through. And then now you're like, da-da-da-da-da. And so we did the same thing in Princess and the Frog. They're dancing. There's this little moment of almost kiss, and click, 60. Right? And it just keeps it alive, right? It changes the dynamics all the time. So I'm always thinking in those terms of like, how can I keep this going? What's the best way to tell the story? And the first part of the question you were asking is like, when somebody hands me a story, I have to find a way to fall in love with it, and it's sometimes difficult. Sometimes what was it? Okay, Undercover Brother 2, they're trying to make it universal. And at first when I saw it, I was like, oh God, I had my problems with the first Undercover Brother, and I had to find a way to fall in love with it. And then once I did, I said, okay, great, I know how I can do it. And then it goes up on the door, it gets pitched, gets either shot down, we'll see. But that's part of my process.
Okay, so then Craig, Rob goes through all of this and hands it to you. What do you do now?
As a director, what I would do then is I'd find a way to fall in love with it. And
be so easy,
right?
Magic.
Well, now it's So then I would. My process at that point is if I'm already attached to direct it, then that's the easy part. If I'm trying to get the job, then I have to pitch myself. I was always much better at pitching myself than I was at pitching an idea. So that's sort of why the directing sort of took off more than the writing. But so I would, I'd figure out a way to pitch myself. Well, what about this script stands out to me? What about this script is what the movie's about? There's always a theme to a movie. There's always an underlying, thing that the movie's actually about. And two directors can look at that and see 2 totally different things. So you bring your unique stamp to whatever it is you're looking at. because you're looking at it. And so then you have to convey that stamp in the room. When you walk into the room, there's a bunch of producers and executive producers and studio people there, then you walk in and say, this is why I'm the person for this job, because no one else can see it like this. And this is how I would bring it to life.
Do you pitch changes when you do it?
Yes, I do pitch changes.
Writers
But
love that.
they're not always...
No, sometimes it's great. At Disney Pixar, it's all about plussing.
Sometimes they're good,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, sometimes,
Plussing the board.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I
Because
call
sometimes
it.
it's like, oh God, I hate that guy. But sometimes, other times it's like, you know what? I never would have thought of that. Or I backed away from that idea, and I'm sometimes thrilled that a director wants to take something farther than I did, because then we can gang up on the producers in the studio.
Well, I always think of it as two things. I mean, there's the script, and then there's the movie.
Yeah.
This would be the author of the script, but I would be the author of the movie.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to be the author of the movie, then there's got to be something in it that I'm bringing to it, other than just what's on the page. So I call that plussing the boards. I got that that's a commercial thing. When I did a couple commercials, and that's where I heard that. And so
cool.
so that's what that's how I would bring myself to the project and try to get that job.
Okay, so Adam, how does the studio fit into this process, and what does it take to get a green light?
It's impossible to get a green light.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly.
Can we be clear about that?
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Now that
Until
now
Kevin
go.
Hart, until Kevin Hart walks in the door,
Right,
and everyone's like,
right.
"Hey,
Exactly.
what do you want to make again? Your
Yeah.
shopping list? Excellent."
Right. Okay. So, so full disclosure, I'm not a studio executive anymore. I'm a producer, but I deal with studios. So I used to be a buyer. Now I'm a seller, but because I used to be a studio executive, I know how to speak executive, I know how to speak financier, I know how to speak distributor, unique languages, which are generally not taught in film school. All they really want to know is, can we sell tickets? And they want to be convinced that they can sell tickets. How do they get convinced? Well, back in my studio days, what we used to do is when you guys came in with your movie and your actors, and if you didn't have your actors, we probably would have a list of approved actors. We'd say, and we'd rank like from number 1 to number 50. We'd say, okay, we'll start with number 1. When 1 passes, go to 2. When 2 passes, go to 3. We're going to get some combination of people that we approve. Meanwhile, we would have been running a sensitivity analysis on our spreadsheets with all of our distribution entities, with our theatrical, with home entertainment, with digital entertainment, with all the platforms we have output deals with, where we would show them the script, the director, the potential cast. They would come back with estimates of how much income they thought it would derive. And we would then put that on a spreadsheet that actually had a disaster and then a home run and 5 in between. So there would be 7 different financial scenarios from absolute wipeout and we all get fired the next day, to success and our great-grandchildren never have to work again. Neither one of those extremes ever happened in my life, either fortunately over here, unfortunately over there. Most of the time it happens somewhere in the middle. And the entities that come back to us with their estimates, for example, when home entertainment comes back with their estimates, they don't want to be punished later if the project doesn't live up to its estimates, so they always estimate low. And that's true about everybody who comes back with estimates. So we're always internally fighting to get everybody to raise their estimates enough to justify the budget, the cast, the package, in order to get that green light. And you know, in some ways, it's really quite similar in the independent space as in the studio space, because even in the studio space, until cast is firmly attached, you're generally not going to get the green light, and that's always the case in the independent space also. That you need to have those elements that make distributors feel they can actually get tickets sold, and as they say so colloquially, butts in seats.
Okay, so a couple of years ago, a very dear friend of mine was working at CAA, and he was in charge of the open assignment list. And I said, exactly what is your job? And he said, I maintain a database of thousands upon thousands of broken dreams. So, Gary, Please break our
I
hearts.
get the broken dreams.
Please break our hearts and tell us about all the legal pitfalls that happen along the way up to this point.
All of them, Gary.
Every pitfall in 30
In
seconds or
graphic,
less.
painful detail.
I'll assume that most people in the audience who are content developers are independent producer types. So basically at the outset, the biggest pitfall is make sure you're protected with your project. Here's a scenario that is not, unfortunately, uncommon. You sit with your friend and you decide you're going to create a project and you're going to write a script together. And you do that, and then you decide that there's somebody else who goes, I know this script doctor. Let's go to her and see. It could be a he. Let's go to them and see what they think, and maybe he or she can help us. So you take the script to a script doctor and you pay him $100, $150, and they give you a list of comments to improve your project, and then you go back with your friend and you rewrite it, and now you have a script, and then you start pitching it. And 2 months from now, you have a fight with your friend, and you're not talking as much. And 4 months from now, you're lucky enough that you're selling the project or optioning the project to a company, except for 2 problems. One, your friend is coming out of the woodwork now and saying, you don't have the rights to this, and the script doctor is coming out of the woodwork and saying, you don't have the rights to what I told you. And you know what? They're right, because you haven't protected yourself. You haven't gotten documents at each stage of the game that says who owns what and how you're splitting things. So it's kind of the more boring part of the whole adventure. But if you don't protect yourself and get something that says I or we control all of the rights to this, and everything that each of us has contributed, I own or we jointly own, and script doctor, you agreed that in return for my paying you this money, that we own everything you've created, and you have that in writing so that when you go to try to set the project up somewhere, you can show to the potential buyer that you control the rights and you have the right to pitch it. If you can't do that, you're going to have problems, because it's hard enough, as you know, to sell anything, but if you're trying to sell something for which you can't establish good and proper title, the buyer's going to run the other way. They don't want to buy a headache where people are coming out of the woodwork and saying, we have claims to this. So the biggest thing from a business and a legal standpoint is protect yourself, make sure you have the rights that you need to the project. And that same thing holds true when you're shooting the project. Make sure you have the rights to put on film what you're actually putting on film. If you're shooting something that has Nike logos, make sure you get permission from Nike before you do it and lock your film. Because when the film is finished and you go to find a distributor, the distributor is going to want to know that you have all rights that you need to have in order for them to distribute the film. And if you don't have certain rights and it comes out after you've locked picture, it gets expensive for you to go back and fix it. Music, same thing. Don't put music in your film unless you have rights to it or unless you're pretty sure that it can qualify as fair use. I can keep talking about pitfalls for an hour or two, but I think I'll stop
We'll gradually
with that.
segue through
I had
some of
a
those.
quick
They're like the
question
big,
about
scary
that.
sand.
Do you mind if I ask him a quick question about
Sure, go ahead.
the Nike logo thing? That's
Yeah.
That's really only if you concentrate on it, or if you focus on it, right? I mean, if you happen to pass a Nike store while you're driving down the street and you're shooting out the left side of the and you happen to catch that along with McDonald's and Burger King and everything else.
Technically, if it's
Technically-
identifiable in the film, you should have permission. In your example, no one may care, and people do it all the time where they'll in a panning shot, they'll show logos and they won't get permission, and you're probably okay. And generally, as long as you don't portray these things in a negative manner, you're probably okay, but not definitely.
And it really depends also who it is and how litigious they are. Major League Baseball notoriously is very protective of their image. They've relaxed a little bit in the past couple of years, but if you have a character anecdotally wearing a baseball cap from an identifiable team,
Well, that I can understand because you're focusing on it.
well,
Not
You have to
necessarily.
go by a
sorry,
billboard
he
that
could be,
says, "Go Dodgers."
the character could be walking through a shot, and you get a call from MLB.
Right.
Yeah,
Go Dodgers is a trademark name, so
right.
you could be.
You could be.
you could
Yeah.
be. Probably won't, but could be. And just to emphasize, just to reinforce what Gary was saying, not only do you have to have those rights, you have to have it on paper, and you have to have it demonstrable and show it. It's like they want to see the physical proof that you've done that.
Yeah. And
Meanwhile-
there's slightly different standards if it's a documentary project than if it's scripted, but we'll leave that for.
Meanwhile, the most brutal images from the Ferguson, Missouri conflict took right outside of McDonald's. McDonald's is in every single shot of it, you know?
And that's not the same case. as
I know,
yours,
but it's like
Right.
that
They're not making
dichotomy
money.
of,
Yeah.
you would think.
Because news
So-
is different, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
definitely.
So, Adam, how does the studio decide when a project is going to die?
Oh, that's a great question.
Thank you.
That's exactly.
That is a great question. Well, some studios never decide that projects die, and they refuse to put them into turnaround. And there was one studio that I could think of that probably still has 2,500 projects on its books because they never want to be embarrassed that they put it into turnaround, somebody else picked it up, made $1 billion, and they look stupid. So generally what studios have is a kind of priority list. It's kind of like your door. But at the studio, the top of the door are the ones that are getting very close, and the bottom of the door, where you kick the door if you don't want to use the handle, those are the ones that you really, you have sort of have in what we call the deep freeze, that we're not going to do anything on, we're not going to spend any money on.
Right.
But we don't really want to let them go because we don't want to look stupid unless there's some underlying rights that are going to expire, like we bought a book for $2.5 million, and the option period's coming up due, and we're going to have to go make the purchase. At that point, if we don't want to spend $2.5 million to conclude the deal, we will let that project go.
Well, now, wasn't that one of the things that was debated as part of the strike?
Yes.
Because I had a project at Warner Brothers, and my producer moved to Universal. He fortunately paid me a lot of money, which means that it was very expensive
Right.
to move around, and I couldn't get it out of.
You couldn't get it on reversion because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, yes, technically, under WGA contract, you have reversion rights if nothing happens, but because studios, I'm happy you were paid a lot of money, but not only studios pay a lot of money, but then they charge interest and studio overhead.
Oh, geez.
So it becomes prohibitively expensive and
It's
really
so
hard.
expensive to keep that piece of paper in the.
So hard to put that Post-it note on the door.
Script.
That Post-it note was so expensive. Yeah.
That script is just like in that box. And
Exactly.
It's, platinum.
So they make it hard. However, you can often negotiate that down, particularly if you have something they want. But they will never publicly say they'll negotiate reversion numbers, but they do that all the time.
Okay.
But keep in mind that it's extremely unlikely that a studio executive who says no to letting a project die and won't let it die and won't let you set it up anywhere else, it's extremely unlikely that they'll lose their job for that. But they could lose their job if they say, okay, it's dead, it's in turnaround, you can now go set it up somewhere else, and then it gets set up somewhere else and made and makes a lot of money. Suddenly that studio executive looks bad. So that's kind of a human aspect of it.
So, Gary, is there a legal CPR that can save all that doesn't cost millions of dollars?
Yeah, exactly.
You want to show this, hopefully show the studio why they're not a threat to make it, and that you have an option that can at least get them back some money. You may have to let them in on the deal these days, because if they're a part of it, then they get some of the upside as well. And it's just a matter then of who you're dealing with. It's trying to point out to them that no good comes out of them keeping it in a drawer, and maybe they can get some money back if they let it get made. As Adam said, if something sits in turnaround for 8 years, the interest costs alone are going to be huge, so you have to negotiate that downward in order to make it practical. But it still comes down to, is it a studio position that we're never going to let anything go, or that we're willing to hear reasonable requests and negotiate?
Okay, so Craig, I'd like you to talk a little bit about that thing that everybody says they understand, but they don't, the casting process.
Okay.
How much does the director do, and how much does the casting director do, and what's the casting director really about, and what kind of relationship does a director have with a casting director, either on an independent feature or on a series that's in place?
It's very different from a series to an independent feature. An independent feature, I would have, total say, for the most part, depending on how I raise the money. If I raise the money in such a way that I had to have commitments first, then obviously those commitments have to be honored. On a series, I really only get say on the day players. Because the principals are already been cast. Everybody already knows who's the series regulars are. So I would really get say on who's day playing with them, guest starring. And for the most part, I've gotten a lot of friends hired that way on TV shows because I could pretty much have a lot to say about the day player. So
have they ever tanked? I set up a friend from college. I gave her this thing, tanked. It was terrible, and I was like, I gave her the part.
Right.
She was really funny at lunch.
Yeah.
I gave her the part.
Yeah.
Boom.
See, I can buffer myself
bad.
more than maybe a writer can.
Yeah,
Because
right.
I can go and say before they come into the room, I can say, "This is what I'm looking for" to
Yeah.
the producers. But then I go to my friend prior and I say, "Do this."
Yeah, bring this in.
So
Yeah,
when they
exactly.
come in, I go, "Oh, that was perfect." And they go, "That was exactly what you were looking for." And I say, "Yes, how can I not hire them?" And they say, "You're right." So now, the second they say you're right,
Beautiful.
I'm off the hook.
Yeah, right. Awesome.
So I can buffer myself, whereas a writer may not be able to
Yeah, no.
in that situation.
Have you ever given anyone their first job?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I've given a lot of people their first job. There's a show called The Game that was on, and a cat named Pooch Hall. I gave him his first job. Richie Jones, who was on, he was on that Terminator TV show for a while, and he's done a lot of stuff. I gave him his first job.
Now, where did you meet Pooch?
Pooch and I are both from Boston.
Oh, okay. There
And
you go.
so I did a film in Boston called Blue Hill Avenue, which was about gangsters in the early 90s. And Pooch that was his first job.
Oh, cool.
So, and then we just worked together again. I just did a pilot for TV One. And and I brought him on.
Yeah, good.
So we work together all the time. Yeah.
See, that's one of the
Then it
things.
works. Then, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, that's one of the things that everybody in Hollywood has in common. We love to have that moment where we can go, look what I found, and be able to introduce somebody. So, Rob, as the writer, what kind of rewrites are involved after the cast comes into place?
Oh, man. See, well, it's interesting because you were talking about the movie you make and the script you read. That a lot of writers don't realize they're very different documents.
Yeah.
That the script you write to sell. I was just talking to Dan Fogelman, a friend of mine, who did Crazy Stupid Love and a bunch of other like fantastic TV shows. He's doing that one now. But we were talking about you have to be able to survive the treadmill. Yeah. So the writing that you are writing to sell has to be like everything is basically spelled out because they're going to miss it if it's too subtle. Once you get into the casting process, great. Then they see the characters. You cast somebody, they know who that is. You can start writing dialogue to that character. And then when you make the movie, you're stripping dialogue out. You just want it to be subtle and fun and whatever, and you know exactly what you're going to get from the cinematographer, from the place that you're shooting it. Everybody's input starts to come in, and so that becomes fun. But yeah, they're very different scripts all along the way, and if you don't know the difference, you're going to get kind of swallowed up in the process.
That was always my problem.
Yeah.
I was as a director, I'm always writing from the end
What you want to
product.
see, exactly. Yeah.
And so I would walk in and executives would go, "What is this?"
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Craig, whatever you're thinking in your head is not on the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but it's right there.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
so when the
I have
camera's
that problem
and the light's
here.
coming through the window, yeah, right.
Right.
No, that's me all the time. Like, Rob, this isn't in there, and I'll circle the stage direction. Like, look, it says it right here.
Right.
But
He's
don't you know executives don't read stage directions?
Yeah, no.
Because it goes all the way. You have to put it in the dialogue because it's short.
The VersaClimber is moving so fast.
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
can't- you just-
Yeah, exactly. You need a little short line.
CNN on the
Right.
screen, and well,
Oh,
you're
okay.
fighting for
That
attention.
was my problem.
That's actually-
I was putting it in this description.
No, no.
I need to put it
actually,
in the dialogue.
Secret
dialogue.
for studios is
And-
it's got to be in the dialogue. Like if you have a stage direction line, Joe gets shot and bleed out on the floor, they're not going to see it. Put the dialogue, Joe.
I'm shot.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm bleeding on the
Then they'll understand what
no,
happened.
there's blood on the floor.
That's it.
I have to clean up all this blood.
Right.
Yeah.
Then they'll get it. Yeah.
No, and you look at what was it? I was reading what is it? David Koepp's first draft of Panic Room. Mm-hmm. Exactly that. Boom,
Right.
boom, boom. Dialogue. Paul Antanasio's draft of Moneyball. Dialogue.
Right,
All
right.
it's right down the middle of the page. The
Yeah.
whole thing. There's barely a slug. I worked with Sorkin on Studio 60. Same thing.
Yeah.
Just dialogue right down the middle of the thing. If there's a stage direction at all, he says the stage direction should not take longer than the action takes to
Yeah.
make. It should not take longer to read than it should take to do.
Man, I'm
so
doing
it's
this wrong.
so he's writing for flow, and you open one of those scripts and you're like, oh, I'm done, 15 minutes.
Right.
You know, like that's what it is.
Yeah.
You're writing it to sell because you just need to sell the idea.
Yeah.
That's
You
it.
know, first step through, you just need to sell the concept, and then you can get in and be an artist and start bringing
I'm trying to
the.
be an artist too soon.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so
Sell.
this next question. On
Get
this
that money.
I'm sorry. On this panel, we have two people who have had that moment of being nominated for an Academy Award. Okay? And one of them, their film actually won the Academy Award. So, Rob and Adam, what's it like to see your film nominated?
What were you nominated for?
Most recently, March of the Penguins.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And before that?
Oh, well, Dead Poets Society got nominations, and
That was awesome.
yeah. What's it like to get nominated? You're up really early in the morning because you're waiting for that 5 a.m. announcement because you're hoping it's the case. On documentaries, there's a short list that's released of a few weeks prior.
And it's crazy early. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning
Yeah,
when they announce it on the East Coast.
Yeah, exactly. So for docs, there's a short list that comes out early of 15 movies. So if you're on the short list, you know you're staying up early that day, and otherwise you just stay up early because you got to figure it out. It's amazing, and then you call all your friends.
At 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, you got to sit on it.
Right.
Sit on it until 8, and then you go. Yeah.
So,
Ditto.
and
Ditto, right?
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and because everybody calls everybody, because usually on a movie, and my two were animation, Treasure Planet and Princess and the Frog, and you get everybody's up. Because everybody,
Everybody's up.
by the end of it, you're just everybody is carrying this huge, load up a mountain, and then you get to this thing, and you always have this feeling like, oh God, I hope, whatever. This is the one. That would be great. Treasure Planet happened after a long Disney drought, so it was the first one nominated after a long, long time. Chicken Little was not going to get nominated, so everybody called. It was like at 5 a.m. just ring, hey man, beep beep, and then like the next call and off you go. It was great.
So good. And then the next 6 weeks are
right.
amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing ride, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
and
And Oscar week, okay, everybody needs to get nominated. The thing that they do is they invite you, they have like hotels, and they have these gifting suites. So if you're nominated, you just show up, and they just give you stuff. They give you like, here's a bottle of wine, here's a camera, here's whatever, a trip to, someplace, whatever. And you just have to stand there with a bottle of wine and go, hey, I'm Rob Edwards, I wrote Prince and the Frog, and my dream is to have so-and-so, and then you just move on. It's awesome. Everybody.
And now
Beat
it's
the
not
next
quite. It's not quite as much fun because they changed the tax rules. I've
Yeah, they
heard.
changed the tax rate. Yeah, right, exactly. So now, you have to kind of.
Oh, so you got to pay for those.
You got
Yeah.
Yeah, they give you the.
Oh, they give you the form and everything.
It sucks.
Oh, it's like I don't want that.
But you
keep that
get, but
guy.
you didn't buy it. It's like
I mean, I hear
it's
you.
like they gave it to you.
So,
It's almost, you know.
But
And
then
who
you-
was it? There was some. Who was the killjoy? There was some specific killjoy that kind of made it.
I don't remember.
Because it used to just be swagalicious.
and a lot of that went to assistants
And for tax
and
purposes, they always
housekeepers.
charge you the price that you would never pay if you bought it in the store.
Yeah, right. Exactly. $2 for this car.
So, Craig,
Yes.
you did, I think, is there anyone in this room who hasn't went, wow, I bet I could make a movie with this, right? And you did it before Tangerine. So what made you do that when you were already established as a director? What was the thought process behind there?
I couldn't sell my scripts.
Oh, wow.
So I decided that I was going to. I really wanted to be more of a content creator than just a director, and I couldn't sell my scripts. So I was like, okay, I got to do something. So I decided to go all the other way, to go into digital, and just the whole point of it was an experiment to show. I didn't feel like Hollywood was using digital technology the way they should be. And that I felt at the time that they were milking it too much. They were shooting it like it was film, but still using, HD, digital technology, So I was like, well, okay, this is not working out well. So I want to show everybody the power of digital technology. So I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to use it as a phone. I'm not going to use it as a camera. So in other words, I didn't, put 35 millimeter lenses on it, and I didn't put up, I didn't even put up lights. I used all practical.
Oh, cool.
And basically I took it out of my phone. I took it out of my pocket. I used, I put it on AirPlay. I point and shoot. I would, edit that footage, put it back in my phone, my pocket, and it's my phone again. But I wanted to show how
Rings while you're
powerful your phone is now in terms of creating commercially viable content, because we have a lot of Gen X storytellers here that are making free content with it, but I wanted to show that you could actually make commercially viable content. So that was what I did. That's why I did it.
So for Adam and Gary, can you walk us through very briefly, because I know it's like a huge ordeal story, the process of distribution? How do you get a film that you've made into distribution, into the theaters? Not just festivals, but into the theaters.
You want to start?
Go ahead.
It's that kind of question, I know.
You have to sell it to your distributors. Selling it to distributors means that so we're assuming, therefore, you're working in the independent space, because if you're working for a studio, you have distribution. If you're working in the independent space, you have to show a distributor that they can actually sell tickets and monetize it in all the ways that they want. This is like a 4-hour lecture. We're going to do it in 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Make sure you hold on to all of your rights, because your distributor will probably want worldwide rights. If you've sold some of the rights, it's going to screw up your distribution deal. I recommend hire a real trailer house to cut a trailer, hire a real one-sheet maker to make a one-sheet. Same people who work for the studios will work for you. They'll work at their indie rate, not at their studio rate. You have your audience in tow. It's been your job as creators to have your audience following you, so you can bring an audience to the table in as large numbers as you possibly can, because what you want to do is present a package to distributors where they do not have to ask the question, how can I sell this? Because you have answered the question for them. Here is the trailer, here's the one sheet, here are the 100,000 people who have virally passed along the trailer, and therefore it's a movie that you can sell. Make sure you have all your rights.
Yeah, make it as easy as you can for a distributor. There are also obviously new models of distribution these days, and I mean, my experience has been more in those newer models of distribution, rather than having an independent picture sell to Universal that then puts it out on 2,500 screens. So with kind of the normal big studio model, it's enter your film into festivals, hope you get picked up, and hope that one of the studios or one of the big distributors is interested in taking your picture. Failing that, you're then in the pool of how do I get my film out somehow? And there are many, many, many distributors out there. Some are good and reputable, some are new and you don't know, and some you're not sure. But from your standpoint, when you're making the film, think about how to make it commercial. It's wonderful to do a pet project, but if the pet project has no commercial viability, when you're finished, it's going to be really hard to find a distributor. Try to make it as attractive as possible. If you have people in your movie who have thousands of Twitter followers or Instagram followers, have them promote it. So as was said, you can go to a distributor and say, we can promote this with X thousands of people. A lot of distributors now are putting finished movies on digital platforms. It's, that's wonderful, and it's also not so wonderful. It's wonderful in that almost anybody's film can get out there. You can do it yourself. There's sites that you can pay money and they'll put it up there. But the key is it going to go somewhere where people will see it? Because there's so many films up on so many sites that the overwhelming odds are that your film gets lost in the shuffle unless you do something to make it stand out. A distributor will be happy to help you, but a distributor is less likely to come up with that strategy for you that's going to make your film stand out. So when in dealing with a distributor, you have to take the lead as much as possible, realizing that for a distributor, ultimately your pet project is one of a number of projects they're distributing, and they have to put effort into multiple projects, not just yours. So as a producer, you have to walk the line between being a pain in the ass who the distributor's not going to want to take calls from, and an absentee producer who just lets the distributor do everything without support. You can, if you go to a distributor with a plan for how this picture is going to be marketed and how you're going to support it and how the cast is going to support it, that's helpful. But it also means when you're making the picture, in addition to funding the budget of your picture, you should put money aside for promotion, because without promotion, your picture's going nowhere.
I won't even take on a project unless the financiers, if it's not a studio, unless the financiers have budgeted money for marketing and distribution. Because there are 10,000 movies made in the U.S. every year, and 9,000 plus of them get no distribution whatsoever. You don't want to be in that position.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a business where the reality is Sundance is one of the top, either the top or one of the top 2 or 3 festivals in the world, really, for films. And there are about, 900 or so films that are submitted to Sundance, and less than 100 get in, and most of those don't get picked up for distribution. So
For theatrical distribution.
Yeah.
For theatrical, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So those are the odds that you're up against. And even if the ones that go out for digital distribution, the odds that they're going to make more than their negative cost out of digital distribution are small. Not impossible, and there are success stories, but the odds are small. So you have to help yourself.
Okay, so now we're going to have another fantasy interlude. In the 5th year of Screenwriting Expo, we got a call from Pixar saying, gee, we like what you're doing. Could we come be part of it? To which it was, thank you, Jesus, Of course you can. But Rob has gotten to do something even better. He's been able to be part of the Pixar Brain Trust on movies like Frozen. So let us into that fantasy moment. What's it like?
Yeah, Frozen, Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph. Yeah, it's an amazing process. The thing that you get that you don't get at any other studio or any other thing is that John Lasseter is sitting right there. He's writing the check. He's the head of the studio, and he's good at taking his studio hat off and putting his creative hat on. Sometimes when you get a studio head, I'm working on a project now, the studio head is also kind of running the room and is very fearful of, this is going to kill us in China, and this is going to whatever, and we've got this distribution thing, and I don't have a star for that. It's like, no, I just want, let's just take the idea and run with it. And so the best thing that they do there is it's, I don't know if you guys have done improv or anything like that, but there's the rule of improv is yes and, right? So you take an idea. There's a lot of times the idea that is the best, an idea that seems great in the moment is sometimes not, because it's just, oh yeah, I've heard something similar to that. It's not all that unique, but it sounds kind of cool. Yeah, okay, good. And then you sign off on that. It's the weird idea that somebody comes up with that usually gets killed, that doesn't get killed in a Pixar Brain Trust. That idea, everybody goes, yeah, and what about this? And then you can take it and do this with it. Oh, great, and then blah, blah, blah. And everybody will just feed off of everybody else's energy, and you'll take it all the way until you pretty much exhausted all the ideas around it. And then it doesn't get killed. It just is suspended up there. And you say, or how about this? And then somebody takes something else, throws another ball out, a ball of yarn, I'll call it, a barn of yarn on the table, and everybody goes, woo, and you jump on it, and everybody gets in the sandbox. You run the idea through until that one is done. At the end of the day, the writer, the directors, I work with 2 directors usually, but the writer and the directors sit down and they say, okay, what do we have that's golden? What do we have, that doesn't work? It's the same as like the relationship between any director and any writer. You're looking for like, what do I believe that you also believe? Mm-hmm. Those 2 spheres. Like, I believe in these things. You believe in these things. Hopefully there's a lot of overlap. And you can just say, great, I like this, I like this, I like this. And then I put them on the door and then off it goes. But it's an amazing process. I do wish that more, it's hard to get into studios because there are so many levels of middle management that just sit there and you get a note and people just won't leave the note alone. And you're like, can you just let me make a great movie around you? And you just, they'll kill all the ideas as soon as they're, in their infancy, and it just sucks. Other part of the system that works really well is that idea of pre-visualization. That you're doing boards and you get to see it, and you get drafts. Like, Woody Allen, he has it in his budget. He shoots two of every movie. He shoots it once, cuts it together, screens it, and says, okay, now I know how to make this movie. And then he rewrites it, recasts it sometimes, and then reshoots the movie, and then that's the movie you see. And it's brutal, if you're this guy who's like, I got a Woody Allen movie, I was like, well, what month is it? Because you Josh Brolin just walked in, but that idea is great, and it's something that in digital you can do, all over the place. Robert Rodriguez does it, a bunch of guys do it. It's great for the creative process because it's not fantasy. You're not just sitting there going, no, really, if I write the sentence right, maybe you'll buy it. You're seeing it, and you're seeing it work, and then it emboldens everybody to take bigger chances.
One of the most inspiring experiences I had as a writer, because after a certain time, you think you know everything, and then you realize you don't know anything. But when I came to have lunch with you at Disney a couple of years ago, and you took me into the story room for Princess and the Frog, and all around there were these storyboards where different artists were conceptualizing different characters. And in the center, there was this huge table, and every couple of feet on the table were art supplies.
Yeah.
And I thought, why don't we use crayons anymore? I mean, it was really just incredible. So, I mean, that's a really big takeaway.
Yeah.
We're getting
markers and then pads that are anamorphic.
Yeah.
The size of a screen.
Yeah.
So everybody's just drawing them, and then Post-it notes once again.
Yeah.
So somebody will put up a drawing, and then somebody will say, "Oh, hey, here's a better expression." They'll draw the expression. They'll put it up on the Post-it on the drawing.
So we're going to open it up to questions for a couple of minutes, and I want you to be really concise in your questions so we can get a bunch of them. Please, no pitching. Please, none of the I've always loved you and I've really, this changed my life. Just ask a question. Okay, okay.
I'll say, well, wait, hey, let's not.
Okay, I'm going to ask you ask first, so yes.
Awesome.
Can you guys talk a little bit about your relationship with casting folks in the development process? Especially in the independent world, I feel like I get a lot of calls to have us use our talent relationships to help get financing to attach talent. Kind of seems like a producer's job, right? So do you see that as a casting director's job? And how do you kind of navigate that to how you guys come together?
Oh, For me, it depends on the relationship with the casting director. If I'm just meeting that casting director, then no, I'm going to probably, stay in my lane. But if I've worked with you a lot and I'm like, look, I need you to, then that relationship changes over time. So the casting situation will evolve. But if I'm first meeting a casting director, then no, then there's another reason why I'm hiring you. Maybe you have a relationship with an actor that I need, but in which case, then, I may say, okay, if you can bring that actor on, would you be interested in being a producer on this project?
Yeah. Right.
And if so, then we can do business like that. But to me, that's how it.
Yeah, exactly. I was just talking about. I have 2 projects now, and they're both like big. Pieces of casting have just signed on to do it, and it's mostly because I always write with an actor in mind.
You bet.
And sometimes I've started kind of screwing around with studios now, where I just name the character, the actor that I want to have play it.
Nice.
So that as they're reading, I was like, oh, okay, I get it, fine, whatever. But in those cases, like you're going through, as you've heard, like the distribution, all of those things, like literally, studios will say, Tom Cruise in an action movie about a Viking, $150 million. Like immediately they'll know. Here's a poster of Tom Cruise with a Viking hat and whatever, and they'll know like this is the exact amount of money that you will get. This is the amount of money it'll make.
Yep.
They know all of that stuff right off the top. But if you say like, okay, well here's John Smith with a Viking hat, like zero money. So it means that you take the script, you get it to the manager, you get it to their agent. Hopefully, if you're at the same agency, there's a lot of packaging that goes on, but it's huge. It becomes a huge thing. So if you are best friends with big pieces of casting, you have a lot of power. If you can convince that person to say yes to things that will hopefully not destroy their lives, that's massive.
And it's all about getting the actor to see themselves in the role. I once got an big actor to say yes to a role because there was a scene in which he took off his shirt, and I'd done the research to see exactly what size and brand of underwear he wore. We wrote that into the script. He called on page 37 and said, I see myself in this role.
Oh, funny. Oh, funny. Fantastic. There you go. See? There you go.
Next question. Yes.
Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Paula. My question is directly to you, Gary, about how to protect yourself or to protect your
IP?
IQ.
IP.
Yeah.
So when you're switching managers, so you're switching lead manager, and they send you up because of a project, they say that it needs some knowledge. And then you go through that process, and now they want to change the premise of the movie, which it's not polished. And then they don't represent the project anymore, and then you feel like you want to switch management. Switch and that's it, or you own them, something.
Well, I'll summarize the question to try to make it a general one that everyone can relate to, and you can tell me if I'm summarizing it wrongly because I'm putting it in my words. What happens if you're working with a manager on a project and the manager contributes something to the project and then you want to switch managers? Does the manager have a right to that project, and do you have to keep them on? And there are 2 answers to that, unfortunately. One is, as kind of a normal course of dealing, many managers will not claim domain over that project because they'll look at it as, well, I'm just doing what a manager does. But some will say, no, if I contributed to your script, I'm attached to it. And they would be right that they would have rights to whatever they contributed to your script. Now, if they contribute an idea, because there are a 10-second of copyright issues is ideas are not copyrightable, expression of ideas are. So if you're sitting in a meeting with them, with a manager, and the manager says, why don't we have this scene take place in a supermarket instead of a movie theater, and you then change the script, that person doesn't have any rights. But if the person says, let's change it to let's change the location to a grocery store, and create a character named Marge who's an out-of-work waitress and she's shopping, and you put all that in your script, then they have more of a claim to it. So it's a hard question to answer in the abstract. It depends how much specific content that person contributed to the script. If they've contributed specific content that they can prove they've contributed, then they have some right in the script. It doesn't mean you can't still switch managers, but it means that you should work out something with the manager you're switching from so that they can't make a claim against the script.
Next
Don't
question.
take notes from managers.
Okay.
Hi, guys. My name is Jennifer. Thank you for being here. Two-part question. Who gave you your first job in the industry? And what is something that you know now that you wish you would have known starting out?
I wish I would have known to invest in Apple.
Or Bitcoin. For me, my first job in the industry was I directed an episode of Strong Medicine, which was a TV show that Sony was doing, Sony TV was doing, but way back in the day. That was my first thing. What do I wish I had known then that I know now? That to sell a script, you have to have, the dialogue has to be.
Right down the middle.
I got in so many rooms and they were just like, yeah.
Dialogue.
I got in so many rooms and they were just, Greg, it's just not right
So
for us.
funny.
Yeah, right.
Like, but it's perfect for you. What's the problem? Well, the problem is we can't see it.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that today.
There you go.
After 15 years in this business.
Rob?
See, first gig. Actually, when I was in college, I was doing an internship at PBS. I wrote, and there was this documentary on making MASH. This black guy on the staff of MASH, and so I said, "Oh, great, black people write TV." That was my first epiphany. And the second thing was like, "Okay, great." When the show was canceled, I wrote him a kind of a jokey condolence letter, like, "Oh, I'm very sorry for your loss," and whatever. And he wrote me back, said, "Hey, pretty funny kid. If you ever come out to Hollywood, give me a ring." And so I called him right away. I was like, "Okay, how's this work?" And he wound up being my sensei. He introduced me to a bunch of people, and I owe him a lot. Thad Mumford.
First person who gave me a job in this business was Jeffrey Katzenberg at Disney.
Oh, coolness.
And what I know now is that you shouldn't make a movie just because you can get it made.
Ooh. You blew my mind.
Well, it's
Really?
because if it's not the right movie, if it's not going to be good enough, don't do it.
Yeah, right. Well, it can. A movie made can screw you.
Yeah.
For a good long
It
time.
can. Yeah.
Okay, so I had one of those, you don't believe this stories, but it's true. I took one screenwriting class, I wrote one script, I got signed at William Morris, I was writing network TV in a couple of months. And I know, it's like totally implausible. And where am I today? What I learned was just because a show sucks before it gets on the air doesn't mean it's going to become a cultural phenomenon like, let's say Miami Vice. And you shouldn't walk away. And also never, ever categorize someone as, they're just doing this, they'll never be anything else. Because no matter who it is, it's going to blow you away when you go, wow, how did they get there?
Yeah, right.
You know.
Have faith in everybody.
So in our last moment here, and that was a great closing question, thank you. Adam, what are the titles of your books and where can they buy them?
Filmmaking, everything's on Amazon. You can find them, just Google, search my name on Amazon, Adam Leipzig. Filmmaking in Action is a comprehensive book about how do you produce movies, how do you actually get them made, from idea through production through post. And then for independent filmmakers, Inside Track for independent filmmakers, which teaches you how to speak financier and distributor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the commercial.
Listen, you have been an amazing audience. I've been watching you, and you've been paying attention, and I hope you've
Yeah, right.
enjoyed
I'm gonna
this.
fall asleep.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Can we get a panel photo?
Yeah, let's get a panel photo.